Alberta oil sands bitumen is primarily used for feedstock for refineries to make gasoline and diesel. But Alberta Innovates is betting that it can be used to make something else, and that's carbon fiber. So feedstock for materials manufacturing instead of refining. So we're going to talk to Bryan Helfenbaum, who is the Executive Director of Advanced Hydrocarbons for Alberta Innovates. Welcome to the interview, Bryan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Look, why don't we start with an overview of the challenge and kind of catch everybody up, and then we'll talk about phase two of the challenge.
Sure. So it was a little less than a year ago that we launched this $15 million grand challenge, Carbon Fibre Grand Challenge. This is under the umbrella of our Bitumen Beyond Combustion, or BBC, program. The Grand Challenge is divided into 3 phases, and we have just completed phase 1, which was a modest $1 million, but it was really designed to bring some new people into the fold. We funded 19 different projects, each for $50,000 each, so just under $1 million, to basically investigate new proofs of concept to convert bitumen-derived asphaltenes into carbon fiber. We were very pleased and lucky to work with just a wide variety of experts from across the lands. Of course, being centered in Alberta, we were excited to have a lot of great researchers from the universities of Calgary and the University of Alberta. But we also worked with those from right across the country, from Ryerson, McGill, UBC, and then into the US and as far as Australia.
So what were the consequences of the phase 1? Have we narrowed it down to a smaller number of teams?
Well, that's part of our expectation. So phase 1, we saw multiple teams achieve that basically ability to spin fiber. Now, the quality of that fiber and the scale of it varied by team. And we held a symposium actually back in November because we really wanted to try to get these teams to start to connect together. Because on their own, they would struggle in phase 2, but we see the potential for strong partnerships. So it is very deliberate that we'll be whittling down the number of teams from 19 to 10 for phase 2. We also expect a lot of new people and hopefully investors starting to kick in for phase 2.
Well, now that's really interesting because essentially what you take is this gooey peanut butter like bitumen, and you have to spin it and turn it into a very thin strand, and then all of those strands are pressed together with resin, I take it, and to make carbon fiber. Have I got that right?
Sort of. There are a bunch of different approaches, and some are going for more of a micro, like a nano carbon fiber. Others are going for more traditional. And there are different pathways that are being investigated: electrospinning, melt spinning, chemical vapor deposition. So, and that's the intent. Phase 1 was really just, a broad approach to see what are some different ways that it could be done. And there's quite a few steps to it. There's definitely a pre-treatment step that is required before you try to spin. And then after the spinning, there is the oxidization, graphitization, carbonization stages, and then ultimately deploying it into end uses. And there are, technical challenges along each of those steps. And likewise, there are researchers who are experts in 1 or 2 of those steps. And we really want to try to bring those teams together for phase 2.
Well, let's talk about phase 2. What have you got planned for phase 2?
So for phase 2, we've allocated $5 million, basically awards of $500,000 to 10 different teams. And the intent is that whereas for phase 1, I would say we set the bar pretty low. We said we wanted people to play around with some bitumen. We gave them access to some asphaltene samples through the asphaltene sample bank run by Innotech Alberta. And then basically, the deliverables were pretty modest for phase 1. But for phase 2, we kick it up a notch. And we're looking at very specific volume metrics. So they need to be able to generate more than 10 grams a day, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we're still very much in the lab, but we're starting to move towards more of a continuous process. And then we have specific quality specifications. Carbon fiber is not just one type of substance. It comes in various grades that are used for different applications. And as you'd expect for phase one, the grades that were manufactured were pretty low, right? People are really dabbling at this point. So now we're kicking it up and setting some very clear targets in terms of meeting specifications, which if they're met would basically be creating fiber that today would have a commercial application, would be a quote general purpose fiber.
Well, let's talk about the possibilities of that, because I've seen some of the numbers that come out of your organization, and they're quite staggering. 3 to 4 times the value of the current production of bitumen if they was, all of today's production was turned into carbon fiber. The auto industry in North America would seem to be a logical market for that. And then on top of that, you've got the fact that you'd set up manufacturing in Alberta to produce this stuff. So creating new investment, new jobs. What are the odds that, in your opinion, that we'll get to that, that future?
So, I've been called the eternal optimist. I think that there is a bright future here, but exactly which markets we're actually going to hit is an open question right now. And so just looking at the examples you gave, the automotive market is maybe the toughest one to crack and may ultimately not be one that we target. Additives, for composites, so additives to concrete, wood, polymers, that may be a more a higher volume and more accessible market. And then just cracking it wide open. If we can create this low cost carbon fiber, it will get used in ways that, frankly, we haven't thought of. Could be textiles, pharmaceuticals, don't know. The market for carbon fiber right now is dominated by aerospace, wind turbine blades, sporting goods. And we may ultimately find that we're not really competing with the incumbent feedstocks for carbon fiber, but rather expanding that market into these, blue oceans of opportunities, looking at deploying carbon fiber in new ways, in high volume and high value ways. But, it doesn't mean that we actually need to meet the specifications for automotive or aerospace manufacturing to have a viable opportunity here.
Now, when I last interviewed you was a little over a year ago, and I won't hold you to this, but you took a good guess and said maybe in 5 to 7 years there might be a commercial industry. How do you feel about that timeline now?
I think it's still, the Carbon Fiber Grand Challenge is designed such that phase 3 would be completing in late 2024. And that would basically be a demo scale facility in operation, proving up, really a high volume opportunity. And at that point, we would say that that's where the private industry will be able to make a decision to sanction commercial projects. Now, it's hard to know if they'll wait quite to that point in time or afterward, and then the speed at which that they could put something together, maybe, a couple of years after that. But I do think we're into, the middle, later this decade that we could see, reasonable scale production of carbon fiber from bitumen.
Bryan, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the opportunity.